All right, we are continuing our little discussion on the Enlightenment. This is the Luminous Mysteries. And the luminous, as we all know, comes from the word lumen, gloria, illuminated, movie stars, light. But normally when we think in English we have the Enlightenment. And the unfortunate thing, this word enlightenment has come to mean the debunking of the Judeo-Christian ideas that is fashionable over the last 100 years to make a mockery of the historicity of the Bible, and to say that the things that happened 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 times in the world, from Abraham 4,000 world in the Bible, are historically inexact, and that the Bible is a concoction of hallucinations of so-called prophets, and therefore we have no reason to read it because it's historically unreliable. But Qumran was not too long ago, we all know the story of Qumran. The Bedouins all know they're Arabs, they're wandering around, taking their sheep, and when they're having a siesta or they're having a chat, they're poking around in this place, living in this area, and they go into some of these caves. For example, cave number 1, they find a copper scroll of Isaiah 3 meters long. I mean, just as one of the findings. And there were up to 400 in these caves in here and all around in this area. There were all up to at least 400 different papyrus, but most of them were scrolls, maybe parchment scrolls. They were rolled up. And what happened? I just mentioned again why we're here, because we just saw in the last picture, we saw John the Baptist was baptizing Jesus. Okay, and what has John the Baptist got to do with this? Well, John the Baptist, as we stated in the last few little talks we had, he was born in Ein Kerem, and he went to live in the Judean Desert. So it's quite possible that John the Baptist was living with the Essenes, because many of his ideas of light, he came to give witness to the light. This is the luminous idea, came from the Essenes, because as we all know, Jesus said, I didn't come to cancel the Old Testament, I came to fulfill. So all the ideas of light, of wheat, of church, of old Israel, can all be found in the New Testament. And so anyway, this guy, John, is called the precursor, the guy who runs in front. He ran in front of Jesus, and we all know the thing. He says, I am the voice crying in the wilderness, make straight the ways of the Lord. May the winding paths be straight. May the valleys filled up, and the hills lowered, and the whole world will see the salvation of the Lord. So he is proclaiming, he is the guy who says, and this is, we could state that this is the Augustan age. We said this is Augustine at the time. There were two powers. There was the power of Caesar, and there was the power of God. And as we've just stated, we saw this picture. The contrast is striking. We have the idea of the Augustus. The word Augustus means capable of being divinized, of being adored. If it were, because his name wasn't Augustus, he was given the title of Augustus to show the people that their Kaiser, their Caesar, was worthy of worship, and so he became a god. So you have the gods of man, and we know the parable Jesus said to give Caesar what is Caesar's, and give God is what is God's. And the man who precursor, he lived here, and he not very far from here. He had his head chopped off, and he lived on locusts, and he had a camel skin clothing, and he went and told people about the coming of Christ. And what do? We sit in our air-conditioned offices and living the life of Riley, and telling people, and then going out and taking the Bible, which we have hardly ever read, and telling them about the light of God. And therefore we have no hope, and that's why the world is in such a mess. Because our prophets, including myself, as a priest is supposed to be a prophet, and now as a priest of being a byword for a madman. So, but anyway, that's the problem. The guy who was the precursor, the prophet, the last, the greatest of the prophet, was John the Baptist. And just by the way, Jesus himself, when we think of how wonderful John the Baptist was, he said that he was the greatest of the prophets. But everyone in the new dispensation would be greater than him. In other words, you and me have the potential to be greater than John the Baptist because we live in the luminous mysteries. We live in heaven. We have been baptized. We have been given the light of God. Now, if we want to see this light, we have to have our time in the desert. If we don't have our time in the desert, we will not be able to see the light. So that's why we're talking about it. And these Essenes, we'll just show another picture, I should be some other ones, of how the Essenes lived, you see. See, they lived as the Judean wilderness. Now, we'll just mention, by the way, of course we all know, that these Essenes, this place in Qumran, which is on the northwest of the Dead Sea, near Jericho, was set up many centuries ago. 2000, there were people living there many times. Even the Romans lived there for a short time. But these guys, Essenes, they were set up shop because they didn't like the Jewish Hasmonean monarchy. They thought it was corrupt, and therefore they went off to the desert and did their thing, studying the Bible. And that's why we've just said why this place is so important, because they were waiting for the Messiah. Actually, they were waiting for two Messiahs, because we all know that their teachings and their ideas were very complicated. But the basic idea is they were living in the wilderness, waiting for the Messiah, waiting for the coming of the truth, waiting to be enlightenment. And we, poor humans, are incapable of telling people about the light, because we prepare for preaching the gospel by having good snacks and eating. Just now, I've just been eating all sorts of biscuits and chocolate cakes before I came in here, and had a cup of tea. Everybody was very kind to me, and I'm all dressed up even without my collar, and therefore my testimony is lacking in oomph because I am not an ascetic. I was an ascetic a long time ago, but in my old age have. But anyway, so it's quite possible John the Baptist lived with these people. It's quite possible that Jesus, when he went to 40 years in the desert, it's quite possible that he was also here. Okay, now in these cisterns and in these compartments, as we've just stated, they found up to 400 different scrolls and parchment in these things. Now we're going right to the north. We're now going to the extreme north of Israel. Just imagine here, you have Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is something like 1,000, 2,000 feet high. And you go from Mount Hermon, at the top of Mount Hermon, it's called, in the Arabs call it the old man, because it's the top of Mount Hermon is white, so it's like an old man. And at the foot of Mount Hermon, traditionally, they say there are 4 little springs. Actually, some people are up to 8. But anyway, the extreme eastern of these streams is Banias. And Banias, it was because of this is the great god Pan. Up to 2,000 years ago, Pan ruled supreme in that area. And there's a very moving story. At that time, when Jesus Christ was proclaiming himself to be the real God and the real Caesar and the real king, there was a ship going through the Mediterranean. And suddenly, we can imagine, from echoing right through the hills and the mountains and everything else, we had this voice: "The great god Pan is dead." Or, in other words, they used to worship God Pan. Jesus wanted to say, "I am the god Pan." In that place, which is also called Caesarea Philippi, was a sanctuary. It says here, look, a temple of Augustus, you see? So that place was called Caesarea Philippi. At the north is also called Banias, and is on this place. This is an artistic reconstruction of the situation. And so this was the Augustan era. And Jesus, on this place, he wanted from the starting his missionary, you could say, effort from the north to the south. He wanted to start off in the place where you could say they worshipped Augustus, they worshipped Pan, and they did puja to the king. And he wanted to tell them very clearly, I am the real Augustus, I am the real king, I am the real Caesar. And how did he do it? He asked Peter. He said, Peter, who do people say I am? And Peter said, you are Christ, the Son of the living God. In other words, he started the Roman Catholic Church here, in this place, because he wanted to show that all these human kingdoms, all these human Caesars, all these humans were passé. The real king was Jesus Christ himself. Okay? All right, so this is part of the Pan Sanctuary. And we've just mentioned the word panic, P-A-N-I-C. The word panic comes from the word pan. Actually, I didn't know that until last week. I've been using this word panic. But the word god panic becomes from Pan, the great god Pan. He had the body of a man, the legs of a goat, the horns of a goat or a cow or something like that, and he was a frightening figure. So obviously, when they saw Pan, they were in a panic. So the English word Pan comes from panic. But anyway, what we're trying to see is this today, quite possibly, we don't worship Pan. But what we do worship is, we worship movie stars, whether it's Michael Jackson or whether our favorite politician, that probably isn't Theresa May, but whoever it is, we worship, we give them all the thing. And so we have now all our modern gods and goddesses. So I just want to round this sort of second thing off on baptism, showing that, you know, a Christian isn't just part of Christ, he is Christ. Because we are the living stones. And when we are baptized, we become supermen. The only way in our lives today that we can make sense of life, make it divinized, theosis is divinized, is to be baptized. And a lot of people will say, well, why do I have to go to a church and ask some miserable old priest, who's probably happier looking at the television, saying, will you baptize me? Well, I think it was St. Augustine, or it was St. Thomas. He said one of the reasons why, Jesus instituted the sacrament, because Jesus could have, like me, Jesus could have come out to us with a wave of hand, all you guys are saved. Everybody's saved and go back home. What do you say? And that would have been very easy for him, or done some, but he instituted the sacraments because we have to be very humble. We have to go to church. And churches are, we don't like going to churches because we have our supermarkets, and we have our villas, and we have our holidays, and we have our dreams. Anyway, I'm going on here. I'll cut off now. I'll see you in a few minutes, but let's just state the fact. If we want to, if we're humble, if we examine history, the only way to be a superman and set things right is to be baptized. It's as simple as that. God bless you.